The Roman Empire dazzles us with its grand architecture, military conquests, and political intrigues, but beneath the marble temples and glorious arenas lay another world, less spoken of, yet deeply woven into daily life: the toilets of Rome. If you were to step back 2,000 years into the bustling streets of Rome, your senses would be overwhelmed, not only by the clamor of markets, the smell of bread baking, or the spectacle of gladiators, but also by something far stranger. For the Romans, going to the toilet was not a private act. It was a communal experience, a social gathering, and, in some ways, an engineering marvel filled with customs that might make a modern person shudder. This is the strange and sometimes shocking story of Roman toilet habits that range from ingenious to downright bizarre. Imagine walking into a Roman public latrine, a room often large enough to seat dozens of people. The air was thick, humid, sometimes carrying the acrid stench of waste mixed with incense or perfume someone had tried to mask it with. Stone benches stretched in long rows, each with evenly spaced holes carved into them. Beneath these benches ran channels of continuously flowing water, designed to carry away the waste into the great sewer systems of the city. Chief among them, the Cloaca Maxima, one of Rome's most impressive feats of engineering. But what would shock a modern visitor wasn't just the architecture. It was the sheer openness. There were no walls, no partitions, no doors. Men sat side by side, shoulder to shoulder, as casually as if they were gathered in a tavern or at the baths. Privacy simply didn't exist in this setting. Talking while relieving oneself was perfectly normal. Politics might be discussed, business deals struck, gossip exchanged, all while the sounds and smells of digestion echoed through the room. And then there was the sponge. Romans did not use toilet paper. Instead, they shared a tool called the tersorium, a sponge attached to a wooden stick. After doing their business, a person would dip the sponge into a water channel at their feet, swish it around, and then use it to clean themselves. When finished, they placed it back in the communal bucket or stream for the next person to use. To us, the thought of a shared sponge is horrifying, but for the Romans it was normal. Some even believe vinegar or salt water was sometimes added to keep the sponge fresh, though fresh might be a generous word. This practice alone stands as one of the strangest, most unsettling aspects of Roman toilet culture. Superstition also crept into the latrines. Romans believed toilets were connected to the underworld. The dark, gaping holes leading to sewers were seen as pathways to spirits or gods who dwelled below. To appease them, offerings were sometimes tossed into the drains. Small amulets, carved charms, or even coins were found in ancient sewer excavations, likely thrown there to keep evil forces at bay. Some believed that creatures, rats, snakes, or worse, might crawl back up through the channels, so magical inscriptions were sometimes carved near latrine entrances to ward off unwanted visitors from the depths. But perhaps the strangest habit was the idea of toilets as public spaces for bonding. In modern times, the thought of chatting with someone while seated in a row of open toilets feels absurd, even humiliating. Yet for Romans it was a symbol of community. Slaves, merchants, aristocrats, even senators could end up using the same facilities, though of course wealthier Romans sometimes had their own private arrangements at home. Still, the act of sharing such a space broke down certain social barriers. Some historians argue that this collective experience reinforced Roman ideas of unity, even in the most intimate of settings. Of course, hygiene was relative. Parasites and diseases spread easily in such conditions. The communal sponge was a breeding ground for bacteria, and the damp, crowded latrines were hardly sanitary. Archaeologists studying Roman remains have found evidence of intestinal parasites, whipworm, roundworm, tapeworm, rampant among the population. Yet Romans took pride in their systems. To them, having public toilets was a sign of civilization, a marker of superiority over barbarian tribes who lacked such infrastructure. They may have been filthy by modern standards, but in the ancient world they were revolutionary. Interestingly, toilets were also political. Emperors built lavish public latrines as part of their grand urban projects, offering them as gifts to the people. These latrines weren't just practical, they were propaganda. To walk into a gleaming facility with marble benches and flowing water was to be reminded of Rome's power and generosity. In some places, even mosaics decorated the walls and floors, as if to elevate the experience into something almost artistic. But not all Romans appreciated the system equally. Wealthy elites sometimes sneered at the unrefined nature of public toilets, preferring the comfort of chamber pots at home, emptied by servants. Still, the vast majority of people relied on the shared spaces, and in doing so they became part of a strange cultural ritual. One of the quirks that continues to fascinate historians is how Roman toilets were connected to the great sewer systems, and how dangerous that connection could be. Methane and hydrogen sulfide gases built up in the tunnels, sometimes exploding in sudden bursts of flame when exposed to lanterns. Imagine sitting casually in a latrine when fire shoots up from beneath you, a horrifying but documented possibility. Others feared malevolent spirits or demons might rise from the sewers, seizing the unwary. These fears gave birth to rituals, whispered prayers, or protective carvings placed near toilets to keep users safe. The latrine, for all its practicality, was also a place of vulnerability. Even the language of Roman toilets carried oddities. Graffiti was common, scratched into the walls by bored or mischievous users. Some of these writings survive, filled with crude jokes, political satire, or cheeky drawings. Latrines doubled as canvases of humor and rebellion, giving us a glimpse into the ordinary voices of people otherwise lost to history. A visit to the toilet could be educational in more ways than one, catching up on gossip, reading graffiti, or overhearing a heated debate about politics while seated on cold stone. And then there were urinals. Romans often collected urine for practical uses, especially in tanning leather or laundering clothes. Fullers, who cleaned garments, valued urine for its ammonia content, which helped whiten fabric. Buckets were placed in public areas for men to relieve themselves, and this waste was later sold to tradesmen. It was so widespread that Emperor Vespasian famously imposed a tax on urine collection, leading to his famous saying, "Money does not stink." To Romans, even human waste had economic value, turning something repulsive into profit. For children and slaves, the experience was different. Chamber pots were common in homes, carried and emptied by the lower classes. Yet even then, the disposal of waste was not always neat. Streets could be foul with refuse, especially in poorer districts where proper drainage was lacking. To live in Rome was to accept the smells and sights of waste as part of everyday life, a reality hidden behind the grandeur of temples and palaces. The weirdest part, perhaps, is how normalized it all was. Sitting in a row with strangers, sharing a sponge, tossing offerings into a sewer, or fearing explosions of gas. These were not strange to a Roman. They were life. Ordinary, unremarkable, part of the rhythm of the empire. To them, what we would call bizarre was a mark of progress. They had conquered the problem of sanitation on a massive scale, creating systems that wouldn't be rivaled until centuries later. Yet, the legacy of Roman toilets lives on. Archaeologists uncovering ancient latrines marvel at the engineering, the sheer scale of these public facilities, and the window they open into daily life. But beyond the stone and brick, what lingers is the human element. The laughter, the conversations, the odd habits, the resilience of people making do with what they had. Toilets might not be the first thing we think of when picturing Rome, but they reveal truths no less important than battles or emperors. They remind us that history isn't just marble statues and heroic deeds. It's also the small, awkward, intimate details of how people lived, loved, and relieved themselves. So when we look back at the Romans, we see both brilliance and strangeness. Their aqueducts carried water for miles, their sewers drained vast cities, their public latrines brought people together. But they also shared sponges, sat shoulder to shoulder without shame, feared demons from the drains, and taxed urine as if it were gold. Strange though it seems, these habits shaped the rhythm of Roman life, making their civilization both advanced and, at times, deeply unsettling. And maybe that is the greatest lesson: history is never neat. It is messy, earthy, filled with contradictions. Rome gave us gladiators and philosophers, aqueducts and armies, but it also gave us the sponge on a stick, the graffiti in the toilet, and the laughter of men seated side by side in a place we consider private. It is in these strange human moments that we glimpse the real Rome, not just the empire of marble but the empire of flesh and blood, of waste and water, of habits that make us raise our eyebrows even today.